The Devils. The next book by Joe Abercrombie is coming out next week, which means now is the best time to rank and revisit the entire First Law series by Joe Abercrombie. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I'm giving you my ranking on the First Law series.
This is the channel intro sound. I couldn't find a music to intro the channel, so this is the intro sound. Welcome to the channel. This is it.
Number 9, and to me, this is going to be a distant number 9, is going to be Red Country. This one is easily my least favorite of the entire series, and to be honest, it's kind of by a wide margin. Now, there's a lot of reasons why Red Country is the worst one for me. I think it's the least funny. I think it's the least compelling. I think it's the slowest one. But really, there's one major reason I don't like Red Country, which reminds me, this video is going to be full spoilers. I don't believe in doing reviews of books without going to full spoilers because I don't like being vague when talking about what I don't like. What I don't like about Red Country, plain and simple, is the return of Logan Ninefingers. I thought that the death of Logan in Last Argument of Kings, that's how I read it as Logan's death, was a beautiful way to end that trilogy and a beautiful way to end Logan's story. And quite frankly, I think just the fact that he's in this book at all completely took it down so many pegs for me. I think it undoes the beauty of his ending in Last Argument of Kings. What's really annoying about it is he brings back Logan in Red Country basically just to do the same thing he did in the original trilogy. It's like he didn't even bring him back to do anything new with him or with his story. It's just the same thing. The only new thing that happens is Shivers drops his vendetta against Logan, but I didn't think that necessitated bringing Logan back. I didn't think that necessitated making him a main character in the book. I don't know. I was personally really disappointed that Logan was back at all. And then I was disappointed that nothing really new happened with him, that he basically just did a little speed run of exactly what he did in the original trilogy. So that's basically why Red Country is so far below. But also, to be honest, like even without the Logan stuff, I just remember feeling like Red Country was an absolute slog to get through. Even throughout the other First Law books, when things were slow or unexplained, any of that stuff, the writing and the humor and the characters always kept me engaged. And Red Country is the only one that's not true. There were several times where I considered DNFing it, not for like any specific reason besides the Logan stuff. It's just for whatever reason, it didn't work for me. The characters didn't quite work for me. The humor I felt like was barely there at all. The writing was, I think it was good, but obviously it must not have been as good because something about it made me not compelled to keep reading it. And so it took me the longest out of all the Joe Abercrombie books to finish. For that reason, Red Country is an easy number 9. All right, number 8 is going to be The Blade itself. The Blade itself is the first book in the series, and basically the reason it's number 8 is because when I first read it, and I've only read through these books one time, when I first read through it, I got to the end of it, and I was a little, I don't want to say underwhelmed, but I was confused because I felt like by the end of the book, there was this whole plot line and quest set up, but I didn't understand what the quest was. We spent a lot of time hanging out with these characters, getting these characters together, setting up, doing all this world building stuff, setting up this like Lord of the Rings fellowship type party. And they're all set to go off on a quest with Baez. But my biggest problem was that I'm not opposed to a setup book. I'm totally down with a setup book. But by the time the setup is done, I want to feel like the setup is done. And I felt like with The Blade itself, by the time it was done, the setup was not complete. I was like, what are we doing on this quest? Baez hasn't told us. What's going on with these wars? We don't know. To me, that's why The Blade itself ranked pretty low on my first read. In fact, it was the kind of scenario where I was like, if nothing is explained or if something doesn't happen that turns me around in book 2, I might not finish the series. Probably on a reread, I'll think a lot differently about The Blade itself, but I will still stand by that I feel like I wanted a more clear picture of what the scope of the series would be by the end of the first book. I wasn't upset. I'm not one of those people that thinks that nothing happened in it, because things certainly happened in The Blade itself, and all the characters are introduced. But I wanted a more clear picture of what the series actually was by the end of it. And to be honest, I didn't quite get a clear picture of what the series was until the ending of the third book. And Joe Abercrombie has talked about this, how he considers it kind of like one book. I understand that, and I get that. Again, I just wanted a more clear idea of what the series really was. I didn't feel like I got that. However, the reason I continued with the series instead of DNFing it is because I could tell, even through this first book, even when I didn't quite understand the scope of the story, the writing and the characters and the dark humor totally carried the whole book. Pretty instantly, you get hooked onto these characters and you like reading about them. That kind of stuff is as good in The Blade itself as it is in the rest of the books. And so that's why I don't think it's bad, and that's why I think there's a huge gap between Red Country and Blade itself. In The Blade itself, while there were some things I was having a hard time with, I never struggled with reading it. I always enjoyed reading it, and I got through it in like less than a week. So to me, that's why it places above Red Country. All right, number 7 is The Heroes, the second standalone book. You know, I thought that maybe I'd be able to like display these along this row of the shelf, but I'm realizing now I'm not going to have enough room. Whatever, we're not going to worry about it. The Heroes. So The Heroes, I think, is great. Here's the reason why The Heroes is placing so low on this list. And to be honest, it's not even The Heroes' fault. When I was reading The Heroes, I was also starting my reread of the Stormlight Archive to get ready for Wind and Truth. And I think I had just reread The Way of Kings before reading The Heroes. And it was just one of those things where, because I had just reread The Way of Kings and my love for that book, I was reminded why I loved that book so much. And it got me super excited to reread the whole series. I read The Heroes in between this and my Words of Radiance reread, and through no fault of its own, I was just really distracted while reading it because I was just thinking about the Stormlight Archive and how excited I was to do that reread. And so there's a lot of The Heroes that I think I just didn't quite appreciate, and that is totally my fault, by the way. That is not the book's fault, because genuinely, I think The Heroes is really great. I'm not one of the people who was disappointed that it was a big 3-day battle. I think I knew that going in, and so I was totally prepared for that. One of the things I like about The Heroes is that structure is so different from the other books that it definitely stands out in my mind. But the biggest thing that I love about The Heroes is the first time we started to get those Abercrombie chapters that switch POVs to a bunch of secondary, not even secondary characters, to a bunch of nothing characters that you never heard about before. And it really floored me when I read those chapters. I think it's in the first day of the battle is the first time it's used. There's like this big battle that happens at the Hill of the Heroes. And it does this thing where you just follow one soldier and you get his little backstory. You learn a lot about him. He's going through the battle and then he gets killed. While you're like processing the fact that this character just got killed, it immediately switches to the POV of the person who just killed that character. And then you learn more about that character and you learn about their backstory and their motivations. And you get this little vignette with them and you start to get attached to them. And then they get killed by somebody. And then the POV switches to the person who killed that person. And this goes on for a while. And so you get this huge, well-rounded view of not just what's going on in the battle, but what the lives of the people are like who fight those battles. It's the kind of chapter that sticks with you long after you read it. And it's the thing I think about when I read The Heroes. And there were some really emotional moments in that book. But I do really like The Heroes a lot. I really respect it a lot. I think when I reread it free of that distraction, I think it's going to jump up in my estimations. But for now, it's a great book, but it's number 7. Number 6 is Last Argument of Kings. This is the final book of the original First Law trilogy. The thing about The Last Argument of Kings, to me, it was the book that cemented the entire trilogy after I read it and made me realize what the point of the whole story was, and it reframed books 1 and 2. It really floored me. Like, it really emotionally moved me by the end of it. It was very impactful. Not just the recontextualization of the fact that Baez is evil and was controlling everything, right? Because I think that's when I see a lot of reviews, people talking about Last Argument of Kings, that's the thing they talk about. For me, it was the moment in Last Argument of Kings that really did everything, was that I realized, oh, the point of this story is that the characters in it are not going to change, and they're not going to become better people, and they're going to be stuck in the way they are forever. It really depressed me. And this is the reason, by the way, that I'm upset that Logan comes back in Red Country, because the fact that the trilogy opens with Logan, who you think is a hero, almost dying, and you're glad he comes back. It ends with him falling once again, and in my opinion, dying. I know he doesn't, but headcanon. But really, it was the fact that as he's dying, you realize that it's his fault, and that he's the reason that he's in this position again, and it makes you rethink the prologue of the first book, where you realize, oh, Logan wasn't running away from villains, like he was the villain the whole time, and I just didn't know it yet. And that was very moving for me, the way that Pharaoh just leaves and goes back on her quest for revenge, the way that Jezal is still a coward, even though he wants to be a better man. He can't do anything. The way that Glokta just doubles down. Even just thinking about it now, I'm really depressed. But that's what makes it a good story. That's what makes it emotionally impactful for me. But the only thing I don't like about the original trilogy is that I feel like the plot line with the battling in the North doesn't really affect or relate too much plot-wise. And what I mean by that is that, all the plot lines that happen in the North with the Northmen and then Logan as he comes back, it's all important for character stuff, but plot-wise, it feels totally removed from the stuff happening in Adua, the stuff happening with Glokta, the stuff happening with Baez, all that stuff. It feels like there are two separate series happening, and they don't actually really affect one another. And maybe somebody will comment and say that I'm wrong about that, and that's totally welcome. I would love for you to explain to me how it relates, but as I finished the trilogy, I just every time I look back on it, I think, what was the point of spending so much time in this northern conflict? All it does is serve to keep the Northmen in the north until they need to come and have a final battle in Adua at the second half of the final book. And that's why Last Argument of Kings is going to come below that. Even though it deeply moved me and it emotionally affected me and it cemented what the trilogy was all about, and it cemented its place as one of my favorite trilogies, even though it did all of that, because of some of, in my opinion, the unrelated plot elements that don't quite go together, like the puzzle pieces don't quite fit. I felt like, I vividly remember feeling like, not that time was being wasted, but why are we spending so much time on certain plot lines that don't seem to be related to one another? That was kind of my big gripe. So that's why Last Argument of Kings is number 6. Number 5, we got another concluding book here, and that's going to be The Wisdom of Crowds. This is the final book in the Age of Madness trilogy. I think a lot of people place Wisdom of Crowds as one of their top books in the series, and I totally understand why. In fact, it's high up on the list. I think it's great. I think for all the reasons that I love Last Argument of Kings, the emotional resonance, the contextualizing the trilogy, all of those things, The Wisdom of Crowds does the same things that the Last Argument of Kings does. The reason The Wisdom of Crowds places above Last Argument of Kings is that all the plot lines are much more interconnected, and they all have a place to play, and they all are related to each other. And in that sense, I think that The Wisdom of Crowds is easily better than Last Argument of Kings. I also think the reason it's still not quite up on the upper tier, like the top 3 for me, is I remember feeling like there was a middle portion of the book that was a little slower until Leo there's like the big climactic scene where Leo and Savine overthrow the rebellion, and then Leo turns on everybody, and that is the moment. From then on to the rest of the book, I was like glued in, and it was great. It was emotional, all that stuff. But there was I just felt like the bit sitting in the rebellion lasted a little bit too long, but it was totally made worth it in the end. And probably in a reread, I won't feel that way because I will know where the story is going. I'm still thinking about Orso's death. Oh, it makes me want to cry just thinking about it. I love him so much. He didn't deserve it. I mean, he kind of did, but man, that was just rough. Savine and Leo staying together. And man, it was just so satisfying. Like, after being so mad at Leo for betraying Savine and Orso, and then thinking he's won and realizing, oh no, I don't really control the council like I thought I would, and having that final scene between him and Savine, peak. The stuff where we bring in, Glocta by the end, which I think is actually something that I kind of called by the end of book 2, but still it was great to see it coming to fruition. That was awesome. Yeah, I thought it was great. The only other thing I don't like about it is, and this is totally mismatched expectations, but I thought for some reason that it was confirmed that this was the last First Law book. And so I was expecting a definitive conclusion to the things going on, and that's not what happened. And I think going back through interviews and reading through what Joe Abercrombie said, I shouldn't have expected that. And, I don't think I'm really upset anymore. I just remember as the book was coming to a close, I was like, man, how are we going to close up all these plot threads? We don't. Which is fine. That's totally okay, because really what matters is the characters' conclusions, and those all work. Orso, Savine, Leo, Rika, Gunnar, all those stories I thought played out really well. Oh, Vic, there was just a lot. I think all the characters really came together. The plot lines really came together. And so Wisdom of Crowds, I think, is a pretty easy number 5 for me. I do think it's really good. All right, number 4, sticking with the Age of Madness trilogy, we have the first book in the Age of Madness trilogy, A Little Hatred. I don't know if I have a ton to say about A Little Hatred. I think it's just really good. The characters are really good. The plot is really good. The pacing is really good. It's all just really good. I think what really helps A Little Hatred is, 1, it's a little bit faster paced than the Blade itself, but 2, I think it does a better job both introducing the characters and the new world, but also telling you, here's what the scope and the story of this trilogy is going to be. And by the time you finish A Little Hatred, you kind of know, okay, I don't know exactly what the plot details are going to happen, but I know this is what this story that I'm reading is going to be about. And the reason it places above The Wisdom of Crowds is I think I never felt like something was lasting too long in A Little Hatred. The pacing, especially just in the Age of Madness trilogy as a whole, but in A Little Hatred is basically lightning fast. And so I never felt like this plotline is stretching on, like I did a little bit in The Wisdom of Crowds. So that's why A Little Hatred places above it. But 2, I think this is a great segue. Maybe this is spoilers for when I maybe do a review on the Age of Madness trilogy. But something that also I loved about A Little Hatred, Joe Abercrombie commits to his characters' POVs. We only ever see returning characters from the original trilogy only if they relate to the new characters. And even when we see returning characters, we only get to basically think about them through the main characters that we're following's point of view, which means sometimes our main characters do not think favorably upon our favorite characters from the original trilogy. Giselle, who's one of my favorite characters from the original trilogy, basically everybody hates him in a little hatred. And I loved that. I thought it was so great. I think even though Orso like kind of likes him, he thinks he's an idiot, basically. And I just love that Joe Abercrombie did not feel the need to do that thing that like legacy sequels do, where we we bring in all these legacy characters and then we have to make sure we hit those nostalgia beats. He didn't do that. He's like, yeah, I'm going to bring Giselle in here, but I'm only ever going to refer to him whenever he shows up in like a scene with Orso or Savine. And even when those characters think about him, I'm going to be honest about what other characters think about him, which is I don't like him. Like Savine hates Galacta. I love Galacta because I've read the original trilogy. Savine hasn't read the original trilogy, so she doesn't really like Galacta all that much. She has a really complicated relationship with him. I love that. I love that so much. I wish more legacy sequels would take that approach. Leave the old characters where they are, and let's experience these new characters. And let's only experience those old characters from this new lens. I just love that. It's one of my favorite things about the new trilogy, that we didn't have to like walk around eggshells with these legacy characters, and that Joe Abercrombie was just dealt with them in an honest way. And I thought that's one of the best parts. And that's established pretty early on in A Little Hatred, and so I love it for that. All right, we are now getting into the top three. And number three, I think may shock people because I think this is many people's favorite, if I'm not mistaken. And that is Best Served Cold, the classic revenge book in the First Law series. Yeah, Best Served Cold is awesome. I loved Best Served Cold. It is paced relentlessly. It has some of the best characters in it. It is both so tragic and so funny at the same time. It's violent, it's action-packed, it's thought-provoking. Everything about Best Served Cold just comes together. I loved it so much. And I just remember like having a blast with it, but by the end of Best Served Cold, just like the original trilogy, being really depressed. And that is no more apparent than Shiver's trajectory through Best Served Cold. When Shiver shows up at the beginning of Best Served Cold, I'm like so excited to see him redeem himself the way that Logan never could, and that doesn't really happen in Best Served Cold. In fact, Shivers gets way worse and more violent than Logan, and his relationship with Monza is destroyed by the end of the book, and it is devastating to read. There's about seven characters in Best Served Cold. Here are my rankings of the crew in Best Served Cold. At number 7, we have Shiloh Vitari. She's okay, but not my favorite of the party. She's cool because she's a character from the original trilogy. Number 6, we have Monza. Monza's the main character, and I like Monza a lot, but I think the other characters either have funnier quirks or more tragic stories. Did she really sleep with her brother? If so, that's gross. She should be at number 7 if that's the case. All right, number 5, we got Shivers. Man, Shivers, like I already said, probably my favorite character in the book. So tragic. You love his naivete at the beginning so much, and seeing his gradual descent throughout the book is so heartbreaking. Thinking about it now, I almost want to cry. I love Shivers so much. He is my boy. I love him. Nothing bad should ever happen to Shivers. Of course, that is not how the world of Joe Abercrombie operates. Number 4, we got Day. Love Day. Don't really have a lot to say about Day. I think Day is just really great, and her end is absolutely hilarious. Number 3, Friendly. What to say about Friendly? I could say multiple things about Friendly. Should I say I could say a number of things about Friendly? I think you would get a kick out of that joke. He is a one-note character with one quirk, and for whatever reason, it does not get old, even though maybe it should. Who cares? Friendly's the best. Number 2, Casca. Casca is endlessly hilarious, and you know what? Maybe that's another reason I hate Red Country, because Casca is funny, and in Red Country, he's no longer funny. He's just the worst human being you could ever imagine. And yeah, he was already pretty despicable in the other books, but at least he was funny in those. He's not funny in Red Country, but he's great in Best Served Cold. I love him. And then number 1, the character who cracked me up the most, the character who I still think about to this day, Morveer, the Poisoner. Oh my goodness, Morveer, you are absolutely hilarious. You can do no wrong. I love you so much. Anytime there's a Morveer chapter, I'm absolutely cracking up at how arrogant he is, how smart he thinks he is, but also how stupid he is. My goodness, I love him. I loved his end. It absolutely made me laugh like no other. I was endlessly entertained by Morveer. Please give me a single book just about Morveer. I would read it on day 1. Thank you. Number two, I think there could be an argument to be made that probably this might be objectively, for whatever that word is worth, the best book in the entire series. But in terms of how much I was affected while reading it, this comes in at number two instead of number one. And I'm talking about, boom, The Trouble with Peace, the second book in the Age of Madness trilogy. The Trouble with Peace is basically a masterpiece. It's perfect. It's perfectly paced. It's perfectly plotted. The characters are perfect. Just like all of the best Joe Abercrombie books, it's funny, it's sad, it's depressing. The finale is gripping in every sense of the word. I could not put it down for the last like 200, 250 pages. It is everything that's great about the first law condensed into one book. I love pretty much everything about The Trouble of Peace. I think most people agree with me. It's so good. I don't have anything basically noteworthy to say because if you've read it, you know, just like everything in Trouble with Peace is great. But also The Trouble with Peace is the best one because it's the best book we get for Orso. Orso is amazing in The Trouble with Peace. I love him with all my heart and soul. And man, does he get a wake-up call in the first chapter of The Wisdom of Crowds after the awesomeness that is Orso in the end of The Trouble with Peace. You already know because it's the only one left, but my number one first law book is Before They Are Hanged. This is book 2 in the original trilogy. I think my feelings with Before They Are Hanged will probably change on the reread. In fact, they really have kind of already changed after I finished Last Argument of Kings. You have to remember that as I was going into Before They Are Hanged, I was like, this is the book that has to convince me that I'm continuing with the first law because I wasn't quite sure. And I don't know what black magic Joe Abercrombie put into Before They Are Hanged. From the first page to the last page, the improvement in quality for me was so large. And I couldn't even point to a specific reason why it was so much better for me when I read it. The writing improved, the characters improved, the humor improved, the plotting improved. Everything in Before They Are Hanged, from the moment I read the first page, I was locked in, man. I could not put down Before They Are Hanged. I think maybe I love Before They Are Hanged so much because, as we've established, the Blade itself set up the characters so well that when the characters started interacting with each other, because we didn't get as much of that in the Blade itself until the very end. When the characters started interacting with each other, like the main party going off on their little Lord of the Rings quest, and when the characters started changing, like with Giselle or with Logan and Pharaoh, I was like, oh, I get it. This series is about these despicable people changing into decent people. And it was so compelling. I just loved it. Giselle's arc was so fascinating for me to read. I'm like, oh my goodness, like I hated Giselle so much. I loved to hate Giselle so much. I cannot believe this guy is going to get redeemed. That's crazy. Like seeing him humbled and then coming back to the top, seeing the way Logan is trying to bring the group together, seeing his little budding romance with Pharaoh. I love the plotline with Glokta in the city, which is this doom city. I liked seeing, taking him out of basically his little Inquisition place and putting him in charge of a mission made him more interesting. The side characters that he meets, like Casca, who is still funny in Before They Are Hanged, was great. I loved all of that. Oh, yeah. And then in Before They're Hanged, you get the plot line with the fight in the north with West and the Northmen. And again, by the time that plot line ended, I don't really think that I still don't see what the point, why that was in the book. It seems like unrelated, but the characters of West and the Dogmen and the Northmen were so good. As each of the Northmen started dying, bro, I was crying, man. It was so emotional. It was so good. The bond that they had with West. West is such a fascinating character. You kind of hate him after the Blade itself, but you come to love him Before They Are Hanged. Oh, I could go on and on. I loved reading Before They Are Hanged so much. I was literally gripped from beginning to end. The book made me cry. It made me laugh. It was everything. You needed this kind of almost hopeful trajectory in Before They Are Hanged for it to hit even harder in Last Argument of Kings, when the characters basically all reverse and go back to the way that they were before. The reason Last Argument of Kings is so emotional and so moving and so depressing is specifically because of the work done Before They're Hanged. And that's why, as much as people say Last Argument of Kings is the best or The Wisdom of Crowds is the best, for me, it's the groundwork that is being laid in books like The Trouble with Peace and Before They Are Hanged that really makes the ending of the trilogies so impactful. And it's the reason that these books have stuck with me. Never forget reading Before They're Hanged for the first time. I was so blown away so instantly. And that's what's crazy. It was so fast. Like, I remember being like, oh, do I have to read about this quest? I don't even know what this quest is. And then for whatever reason, I didn't care. Like, I read the first chapter with Logan and Giselle, and I was like, I don't know what it is, but I'm in it, and I love it. I love everything about these characters. I don't know. I think Joe Abercrombie must have, engaged in some black magic that changed my brain chemistry, because Before They Are Hanged blew me away so fast, and it was so good by the end of it. That is my ranking of The First Law. Before They Are Hanged is the best book in The First Law, and you can fight me on it. I don't care. Before They Are Hanged is the best book. Morveer is the best first law character, and I will take no comments or questions on this matter.